Mother of all storms is at our doorstep. We're looking at a projection of possibly 2 feet of snow tonight. So all the guys, I started getting texts from everyone. Hey, I'm getting the loader out. Does anyone, kind of all the men getting ready to deal with all this. So that's always good to see. It's very nice to have a solid community like that that can come together to look after its own. It's pretty unique. I feel pretty privileged to be part of it. It is a chilly 25 degrees this morning, and the snow started falling light last night when Mrs. W and I were about to go to bed, and then it started up this morning just before breakfast, and it's just increasing and getting harder and harder. So we're going to get the driveway blown out again and see where it takes us. We might even, being it's Friday, beings. I'm not a smart man. It is Friday, and that means the coffee shop is open. So we might have to run over there, and we can hit. There's a couple of friends and neighbors we have that we probably could use their driveways blown out, so we could go do that. We're getting a little cabin fever here, blowing our own driveway back and forth. Good afternoon, Brent. Oh, goodness. We have a super chat. We're kicking off big time from Trey Melendez. God bless. May me and my fiance love your videos. Well, goodness. Well, shout out to you, Trey. That was very generous of you. Thank you very much. Thanks for watching. It's going to be, if this storm, I've been watching it pretty close this morning. If it hits, we will definitely be out at night, and that's always the funnest. So I'll look forward to that. I'll make sure I have plenty of caffeine on hand. We might be out all night, and it's just beautiful when it comes down like that. If it has the potential to snow, they said at minimum 16 inches. Then that could be 2 feet. That's really something to see, a snowfall like that. Incredible. But thank you. Goodness, what a generous offer, and shout out to you. Let us proceed. Diesel? I don't know. I buy it in bulk. I have the fuel truck just comes by about twice a year and tops us off. So I don't know. It's whatever the going rate is, I guess. Goodness, shut it down. We have a super chat from Xavier Goslin, who writes, have you received my email, Cody? My bike is getting built this week. 2002 Yamaha timber sled Aero 3. Goodness, shout out to you. That's a very nice kit. Now, what length is that? Is that 120? Is that the 120 sled? I also am building currently, or we're not building it yet, but I've got the parts on order. We're building a custom Yeti. So what we're going to do is we're starting with the race tunnel. So the race tunnel is for the 120s for the East Coast guys. It's narrow, and then we're retrofitting 137 tracks or rails on it, and then we're taking that 137 track, and then on a table saw we're cutting off like 6 inches off of that thing, and then get hard edge. So basically what you have is a 137 that's super narrow. And then with the bike with the new Vortex or the Air Force intake and the custom pipe, which is going to be huge, more tuned for the bike to run it, develop power at the higher RPMs rather than torque at the low end, which is no good because the snow bikes are all about track speed. So that, and then that with the ECU is going to bump the horsepower on that 450 up to, pretty close, 69, maybe even 70 horsepower, potentially. So it's going to be quite a thing. I have not I don't go, Mrs. W goes through the emails, so I'll ask her about that. But thank you for that, and shout out to you. Let us proceed. What watch am I wearing today? I'm wearing the, today I'm wearing the Garmin Phoenix. Storage containers. No, she doesn't have to remind us, or remind me. She's not a nag. She's a smart woman. She understands that would have the negative effect on me. Get some defrost going there. Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is it was all about getting that shop up. And the shop is up now, but we still don't have the doors, so it's not secure. So as soon as we get the doors, then we'll start unloading those things. Oh goodness, shut it down. We have a super chat from Xavier Goslin, who writes, "You should look at RP race exhaust. My timber sled is a 129-inch." Yeah, that's who is building my exhaust. Is RP. They're building. You should see it. So the factory exhaust on the SXF 450. That's that's the race bike. Is, I don't know. Yes, that's like so. But the new exhaust it's huge. I mean, it's like this. It's just massive. So the head pipe and the mid pipe, and then the hole out the back of the of the silencer is. So I've heard it. The guy I'm actually copying, the build that the guy that did my bike, he's already has it, so I can see it and hear it. I mean, when you hear it, everyone says the same thing. They say, "Goodness, that bike sounds angry," which is a good sound in the forest, because the factory exhaust, it sounds like a wet fart. It's kind of, once you hear it, you can't stop hearing it. All right, well, shout out to us for having snow bikes. Let us proceed. Gentlemen, ladies, take a moment and hit that thumbs up. See, the bigger pipe, it's not a bigger pipe for a bigger pipe's sake. This is all done, this is all done on dynos. There's smart guys behind this. And those bikes are designed to develop power and torque on the low end for a motor, like a racing application. But a snow bike doesn't. You're not running that way. A snow bike, you're running in second and third gear, pinned. 7, 8, 9,000 RPMs. The red line on that bike with the new ECU is going to be 12.5. So you need a very different power. You need your power to develop very differently than a factory motorcycle. I mean, I'm just parroting what they told me. I mean, I don't want to come off like I'm all knowing about it, but you don't have to be all knowing. You just have to hire or talk to or consult the guys that are all knowing. Goodness, shut it down. We have a super chat from Robert Phillips, and single alternator member. "Hey Cody, just wanted to say Merry Christmas to you and the family, just to thank you for informative content." Well, shout out to you, Robert. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Merry Christmas to you and your family as well. That's something they can't take from us, is the joy of our families. Just turn off that router for a couple days and they can't get at you. But thank you. Shout out to you. Let us proceed. Oh, scroll back up. Noel said, did I miss something? What did I miss? What did I miss here? Oh, sorry. We have a super chat from Brent Beck who writes, hey, Cody, love the videos. Where in Oklahoma was your family from before they moved out north? Goodness, and shout out to you. I appreciate that. I wish I would have remembered what the name of the place that my grandfolks had. I just don't remember it. You know, it's still in the family because they retained, I guess they retained ownership of the land. The whole family owned it, and our distant relative was sharecropping it. And there were also some oil rights or gas rights on it, but they were insignificant. It was, you know, like between the three brothers, it was like $92 a year or something to that effect. But they still did own it. But what happened to that estate and everything, I have no idea. But on his side of the family, there was some pretty hateful and greedy relatives that were money grubbing and grasping, and they were still involved with that church. So they glommed onto all of that and you know, stripped everything like a carcass. So I don't know. I don't remember where it was. Someplace flat, I can tell you. Someplace very flat. Granddad said he had a side job. Well, they did everything on the farm. They had a self-sufficient homestead and farm. Their own cows and grew their own food and such. But he also ran a trap line, and he trapped skunk and whatever. And you know, he said a good pelt in the wintertime was worth a week's wages of a guy working out in the field, like a field hand. So he put a lot of effort into that, and he did pretty well with that. He said one time him and his brother were hunting together. He said he had a little Winchester 22, pump action 22, I think it was, or bolt action, one or the other, that they would go and run their trap line. And he said they'd set a trap line near a culvert, and there was something in it or tripped, and he looked down in it and shined his light down in it, and he could see eyes inside this culvert, a whole bunch of eyes, like multiples. And he got to looking, and what it was is there were 7 skunks in there. And at that time, if I remember right, he was telling me that a skunk hide was worth most of all. Those were in demand at the time. He said, when I looked in there and I saw that, it looked like it was a diamond mine to me. All I saw was dollars. It looked like a diamond mine, he told me. So they devised a plan of how to get these skunks out without destroying them, because they wanted to preserve the pelts, right? So Granddad and his younger brother Speed went down there. He said, I'll take the rifle and I'll wait at the end. And when he comes up, when they start coming out, when you start scaring them out, I'll just shoot them in the head as they poke their nose out. And Granddad on the other, he found an old piece of barbed wire that's laying there and kind of rigged up a stick on it. And the deal was to kind of start churning it in the other end and driving the skunks out to his brother Speed. And he was gonna shoot him in the head. Well, he started driving them out, and sure enough, they came out and they started spraying. And Speed was shooting, and he was getting them, but they were spraying, and he was about halfway through it. And Granddad said, all I could see was just a fog of vapors. Speed in there with those skunks. And he said, I hollered at him. I said, Speed, you need some help down there? And he said, yeah, Uncle, I need some help. So they traded places. The skunks were, kind of in between. Traded places, and then they continued with the barbed wire deal, and then my granddad finished off the rest of them, and they got all of them out of there, but both of them were completely contaminated with that stink. That was a funny story. I remember him telling me that so many times. It looked like a diamond mine, he said. Oh goodness, we have a super chat. I'm sorry. We have a super chat from Mr. Robert Kavanaugh. Shout out to you, Robert. Thank you very much. And Robert writes, new to home ownership and wood stoves. Your channel has helped me immensely for keeping my family warm. Thank you for everything you do, your knowledge and insight. Well, I sure appreciate that. And thank you for your generosity. And shout out to you and your family in your new home. Yeah, I've been thinking about all those things a lot myself. There's my water here. I was working late last night. Mrs. W had to come out and get me and make me come in. But I've got that toolbox, that big chainsaw box I built for the fire tools. You know, and my original intention, what I wanted was I wanted to have a one place where I knew everything was, where in an emergency, and that could easily happen up here. Someone calls in the middle of the night, hey, does anyone have a chainsaw? Or the cry goes out in the community, does anyone have a chainsaw? You know, one of these big 200-foot fir trees has fallen on a house and smashed into upstairs of a kid's bedroom, and we're trying, you know, that sort of thing can happen. Or an ambulance or emergency services cannot get to us because trees have been knocked down, big trees across the road. So that, you know, that sort of thing, you have to be able to figure, you know, what is it that you need that's going to cover that, but not try to have so many things that it becomes just too cumbersome. And one thing that's really helped me with is I've had a lot of experience working I worked as a career structural firefighter in Colorado as a paid guy on an engine company. I was started as in the back seat, and when I was ended, I was engineer. So I went through engineer school and all. So I ran a ton of car wrecks. That was pretty much our MO. Our patrol area there, or our response area, was on Interstate 80 up at 10,000 feet. You know, right there is coming down to the ski resorts from the Eisenhower Tunnel. So a ton of traffic. You know, an hour from Denver. Up on the weekends and people slipping on the ice, you know, that's 10,000 feet. That's where I slept, was at 10,000 feet. It's where we lived. It's pretty a harsh environment up there. So I learned a lot about you know, what you need to solve problems. Car goes down over the bank and flips upside down in 2 feet of water with occupants trapped inside. How do you deal with that, and what do you need? You know, we learned what we needed. How, you know, what happens when someone's out on the ice? You know, what happens if you just need, you know, 300 feet of rope? Can you produce 300 feet of rope for someone that just dropped down into a river or is freezing or stuck, you know, hanging on? Who knows what? You know, all those things. Is that my responsibility? Well, I think it is. I mean, if you have the ability to do it and take care of your community, because the truth, hopefully there'll be another guy when you're not around, when your kid is in need, or your wife has slipped off the road, is able to provide that. So it all comes, you know, it all comes full circle. But having that experience with the fire department, and then also extensively with the wildland side, where everything is about solving problems, overcoming difficulties in a forest, you know, in a woodland environment. So when I was looking at my box, I was kind of going through everything, and like going through chainsaw, getting everything, you know, ready, cleaned up from all the abuse of the summer. That box has really kind of just become a big catch-all for junk and garbage, and things I don't know where to go or don't have a home, you know, lift up the lid and poke them in there, and to kind of out of sight, out of mind type of thing. So I pulled all that stuff, and going through all of that, I want that box to be what was originally intended. I want a saw in there that's ready to go. I want some flares, and so just some basic, you know, a few tourniquets, rope, you know, basic things, tools where you could get into and handle and deal with it, you know, most problems, and you wouldn't have to think about where is it all and do I have what I need. Back up there, 2 guys can lift it up there, throw it in the back of the truck, and you're good to go. All right, let us proceed. Oh, did I miss Brent? I'm sorry. Overton. Brent Beck, $5. Hey, Cody, love the videos. Where in Oklahoma? Well, I got that one already. Let's see. And before Jason Barr. Jason Barr. Shout out to you, Jason. Jason Barr, and thank you to shout out to Overton for picking up the slack here. What do you say, Jason Barr? What is your thoughts on being in the world but not of the world? Now that's a good question, isn't it? That's riding the tiger right there, being what he's talking about is he's referring to the good book, the scriptures, guidance from the Lord, telling us that we need to be in the world but not of the world. So the reality is we have to. Always the best way to answer these questions is not with a man's pride. You'll immediately want to go to some analogy or some particular insight that you think you might lay down to the masses, right? I mean, but the way we want to study and look at these things is when that question comes up: how do you be of the world, in the world, but not of the world? We have to look to the example of the 66, right? So, do we have an example there? So, God tells us to be separated and to be a peculiar people. I remember growing up, I used to be drilled into, especially when I was in an isolated Christian cult. We are a peculiar people, and no one growing up, especially a young boy, wants to be. No one really likes to be odd or stand out, and you definitely don't want to be peculiar. So I always struggled with that. What in the world does that mean? I never considered myself to be peculiar, but once I got older and understood it, what it meant is just what he's talking about. It is to be set aside, to be different. What we were talking about yesterday. It starts with just the way that you conduct yourself and the way that you dress and the way that you keep the way that you are seen by your friends and family. It is a powerful ministry in itself. It would be ludicrous. Like me thinking back when I was, I can never say I never did not believe in God. But for a long time, a decade or better, I believed that I was so beyond salvation that there was no hope. And so I just thought, well, I'll just take life to the max, and experience everything it has to offer in hopes of at least finding some happiness there somewhere. I think a lot of people fall into that trap, right? Then I grew up and realized that that was not the case, and I'd wasted a lot of time, and here we are today. I don't know. I don't know that there is anything that you can do apart from just the obvious, what I'm talking about, the basics. Keep your appearance good. Have good personal hygiene. Set a good example in all things. Whatever your hands to do in all things, do with all your might to honor God. And that, take care of yourself. I was listening to a guy on the internet this morning that I follow pretty regularly, and he was talking about, he's a African American guy, and he's kind of speaking to his audience. And he's just talking about to a lot of young men that follow his channel about how ill-prepared men are these days with just the basics. They don't even understand the basics. They never had anyone to teach them, how to groom themselves, how to clean themselves, or how often to, or how to keep a house, or how to clean and wash windows. And a lot of these things are just so lacking, so basic. And he was getting frustrated in this, and that even these things these days are not, you can't take them for granted that these are just understood. And setting yourself apart from the world, and it really starts right there. Once you kind of start on that path, and that's what you can do personally to start changing your life. Then when you start spending time in prayer and drawing closer, and opening yourself up to the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, then He'll make those changes, and those changes will be very visible. You'll every once in a while, and some of us have had this experience, you'll come across a powerful soldier of God that is a powerful person of faith. And it's not because of anything that they do or say so much as it's just a calmness and a peace about them. You can just pick up on it immediately. And you're often drawn to people like that. And that's where you ultimately want to be. You want to be, you're set yourself aside physically, in the way that you dress, women dressing like women and men like men. Hold to those traditional values. Keep that separation. It's really important. There's a reason why the enemy is trying to blend it for some reason. That is obviously on the forefront. That's what's being used to attack the culture. That's the tip of the culture war right now. So holding a line against that doesn't mean that you are, trying to harm someone that believes that way or have anything, wish ill will on them. They have their free will to do that, but we don't have to participate in it. And if we find ourselves in institutions that don't support our beliefs and that are forcing this, then you have no other choice but then just to walk away from it. You don't need to, you can work to change it if you want to, but some of these things are so entrenched and the government is so big, and it would take forever, and I just don't know that it's going to reverse anytime soon. So we just need to start withdrawing from that. So what it looks like ultimately is the more and more civilization breaks down and strays further and further from our core beliefs and from the teachings of the good, of God, then it's going to be more and more obvious who we are versus them. And then when you start adding in, choices of inoculations or medical procedures versus not, are even going to further, separate the two groups together. And it's going to happen automatically, I think. People are making decisions now, and God's dividing up his people like we've been talking about. But yeah, it's not a story that comes to mind on that, talking about separation. One thing that the Pharisees used to do back in the day is they were really, really showy. So let's say it was Sabbath and you were walking through the marketplace there in Jerusalem. There was no question who the Pharisees were. They had very elaborate garments on. And Christ, even when he was getting after them one time, he was bringing light to, they enlarged the borders of their garments to make things even more dramatic. Imagine like someone putting shoulder pads in, and they tied the phylacteries around their head, and the phylacteries got bigger and more elaborate. A phylactery is a small wooden box that would have particular scripture or something written inside, that rolled up inside, that they would actually wear on their foreheads. They would tie it on there. It's from a commandment back in the Old Testament of write my law, around something to the effect where God is talking, my law and my commandments, always have it bound to you at all time in some aspect, and they take it literally and tie it to themselves. And they would enlarge these phylacteries and wear them on their arms. And they were very gaudy and opulent and very prideful people. And God, Jesus pointed this out, that yes, these people have separated themselves, and it's clear that they're the holy men of the priesthood. But they've separated themselves out for their own glory and to appease their own vanity. They're having their reward right now. They will not be rewarded by God for this. So the separation, I often go back and forth. I wonder sometimes about I have been around people that did this that separated themselves their appearance in a way to draw attention to themselves. But they would have you believe that it was for the glory of God, that, hey, we're rejecting the opulence of Western culture and all of these expensive and fancy things, and we're going to go back to traditional clothing. And I've seen them, and the poor woman will be, and many times I've seen that this is the opinion, or the father or the husband of the relationship comes to this opinion and foists it upon his poor woman, who is trying to be subservient and obedient to her husband. But now she's in a prairie dress and a prairie bonnet, and that can be a little bit much sometimes. I understand what they're coming from, but if you make such a show of yourself to bring that much of attention to yourself, it just seems like virtue signaling, and it's deplorable if it's done in that manner. And I don't know, God knows the heart of all these people. But it seems to me that it is often done for just, hey, look at me, look how holy I am. And that's the worst thing. And, and separating yourself. So it just has to be genuine, whatever it is. And separating yourself from the world could mean nothing different than the longshoreman that shows up and doesn't participate in the lewd language. That right there, you're wearing the same clothing, you're doing the same work, you're eating the same food, but That is one thing that would separate you right there. And you don't have to preach to anyone. You could even quietly bow your head if you have the courage, not men do. Bow your head in an environment like that silently and give thanks for the food you're about to receive. You don't have to say anything to anyone. That's going to separate you immediately. And what you'll often find in big groups is that throughout the weeks and coming months, you'll have men come to you secretly with questions. And that's when you are ready to spread the gospel. When someone comes and is ready to receive it. That's the way it should be done, not Bible thumping. And I question the effectiveness of standing on the soapbox with the bullhorn and publicly annoying folks. I wonder if that isn't counterproductive, but I don't know. Maybe people are reached that way. I wouldn't be, but maybe people are. I don't know. Let us proceed. The case for Christ, yeah. I have. Isn't it a book? I think it's a book. There may be multiples with that title. I could be mistaken. Seems to me what the world doesn't need in this current time and place is another self-help Christian self-help book full of the wisdom of man. We need to get back to the solid meat of the word, which is the 66. Let's get some air moving here. All right, full throttle. Let us proceed. We've got, there's probably 2.5 feet on the ground. And a potential of 2 feet tonight. Goodness, we have a super chat from our friend, Mr. Jason Barr, who says, man, you voice things in an honest, palatable way. Thank you, I appreciate that. And shout out to you. Shout out to you. Let us proceed. Oh goodness, shut it down. We have a super chat from Standard Land and double alternator member. Just hello emoji ideas for after dual alternators. Well, Standard, shout out to you. I am preparing some for Christmas. I actually started on them last night, or at least starting the thinking process. I will be dropping them shortly, so I'll let you know here the next day or two. But shout out to you. Thank you for your generosity. Let us proceed. That's a very good question. I think we need to address that very briefly here. That's a very good question. Tim Horton. Tim is asking, if you Christians say that there's only one way for a person to be saved, to be redeemed, to be reunited with God is through Jesus Christ, who didn't come, but there were souls, thousands, who never had the opportunity to hear it, or even hear, or even worship the God of the Jews or anything. So are you telling me that because they didn't have access to Jesus Christ and his saving grace that they will be lost? Because if that was the case, then I would mock a Christian God as well. I can give you what the Christian perspective is and how we understand it. How I understand that is that God tells us in the Old Testament that I've written my law upon your heart. There's a lot of been argument and speculation about where does morality come from. Is it something we just pick up from culture? You know, the atheist is always trying to tell us that we crawled out of the primordial ooze and it was the tooth and claw, and the only reason why we don't go and savagely murder our neighbor on a regular basis is because of societal indoctrination, that there's nothing inherently in us that prevents us from reverting back to the savage. But what God tells us in the 66 is that I've written my law upon your heart. There is something inherently understood that there is wrong and there is right. I think across almost every culture or all cultures, those that are exposed to Christianity and even those that never have, we share a lot of commonalities. Everyone agrees that it's okay to have a woman or a wife, but everyone also agrees that it's not okay to have anyone that you want. You know, and that's what's very different than maybe some of the, that example. So if we look at it that way, there's a lot of commonalities. They're just things that are just understood. You know, of course, there's anomalies and outliers that people like to focus on, but as a rule, we just, as people, just kind of commonly understand that there are things that are right and there are things that are wrong. God tells us that He's written His law upon our hearts, that we understand this instinctively without being told. So the way we understand it as Christians is how a man will be judged with according to the light that he had. You know, when we hear the stories of the man given the talents, one was given 1 and 1 5 and 1 10, you know, we see, well, one was given less, there was much less expected of him. Is as much expected from a boy born with severe Down syndrome that lives to 40 or 50? Is the same expected of him that is expected of someone that's able-bodied and of able mind like me? Is God going to judge us on the same standard? No, He's not. He's going to judge us according to the gifts that we were given, according to the insight that we had received. And the Buddhist monk that sat on a mountaintop his entire year, or the Native American that lived before anyone had ever a white man had ever set foot on the continent, who died, will be judged accordingly to how he responded to the things that were naturally known to him to be right and wrong. And it's going to be very interesting when everyone is in the kingdom together and hanging out and getting reunited at the feast of the Lamb. Because there are people, they're going to wake up in the kingdom that have no idea who this Jesus is, or this crucifixion, or the Lamb of God, or have any context to what's going on whatsoever. So there's going to be a lot of folks that are going to need to get up to speed on these things. And there's even going to be children, maybe, that were slain as infants. Or are their souls are they not created in the image of God as well? Will they not need to grow up and learn and be educated and understand the history and what happened? So that's the way that we look at it. So anyone that condemns and just makes a blanket statement that this man is condemned because he didn't know our Lord, you don't know that. That's why Jesus takes so special pains to point out, be careful about your judging. Be careful about how you're looking at other people. You may see one thing, but you have no idea the relationship, the struggle. I heard someone told me one time that, if you think that you have problems in life and your burdens are worse than your neighbors and your friends and your community, I just challenge you, go get all the men in the community together and have them take all their problems and lay them down in a pile around a fire and see if you want to pick someone else's up and exchange them for yours. And you don't. You go back and pick up your own problems. We all got problems, and when you start looking, so you focus about that. Such a funny story. I'll close with this, but it was after the resurrection, after the crucifixion and the resurrection, when Jesus showed himself before he ascended the final time. He spent some time with the apostles, and he's walking on the shore with John and Peter, right? And we have the famous story of Peter, do you love me? And Peter, do you love me? The 3 times, right? And Peter's getting a little hot under the collar, and not liking to be reminded of how he betrayed the Lord. And so he changes the subject, and he's like, well, what about this one over here? He's pointing to John, which is the disciple that Jesus loved, the one was very, very close to Jesus. He was not willing to spend one moment away from him. He knew he had limited time, and he was unwilling to, even though Jesus wanted to talk with Peter one-on-one, John still was not going to let him out of his sight. He was not going to let anything get between him and his Savior. Just gives it a little insight about his admiration and love for his Savior. But when Peter turns to him and says, well, what about him, to get the heat off of him, Jesus looks at him and says, what is that to you? And I'm paraphrasing, so that's between me and him. You worry about our relationship. You worry about yourself and me, what we have going on. You don't worry about John over there. John and I will take care of him. So anyone who's a busybody in church or gossiping and causing problems is operating completely outside of the gospel, and you shouldn't be tolerated. Most of the time, you're going to see it unattached women, with women that don't have kids or are bitter or angry or don't have a man at home to temper any of that, and they turn the church congregation becomes their baby, their child, and it becomes their personal mission to mother everyone, and that's a deplorable situation, and you need to get out of it immediately. The patriarchy is designed to be the head of the church. Don't think it's some special privilege either. I mean, the obligation that comes with that is tremendous, especially if you have a family, and kids. We have a super chat from Mr. Jason Barr. Shout out to you, Jason. Thank you for your generosity. Jason writes, one of our tendencies to add or subtract from the gospel. We need to give the gospel and let the Holy Spirit convict, repent. There it is right there. Just look at the perfect example is what happened to the Jews, at Jesus' time. God's commandments were so simple, clear, and concise. They were designed to provide a community freedom. If everyone here's to the commandments, even just the golden rule, just imagine the society you would live in. It would just be, you wouldn't have to have police, you wouldn't have locks on doors, any of that. It would just be, justice would be, I'd prefer to live in that environment where it was equal and level, and you knew the rules, and it was the same across the board for everyone. So that was the government God set up. Well, of course, as time goes by, especially when you get politicians or theologians or scholars, they want to have a legacy. They want to write some bill or Obamacare this or that, or some legacy that just becomes a massive burden and bureaucracy on top of all the other ones on the people, for no other reason than just arrogance and pride. And those all build up, and they never go away. If I were to set up a government, and if I ever become king for a day, the rule would be simple. If you want to pass a law, and if we have to deal with what we have and try to fix it, if you want to pass a law, go ahead, pass it, whatever that may be, but you need to repeal two, and down the road we go. So government starts to feed on itself, and the more proactive it is with legislation, the more it devours its own tail. It's a beautiful and elegant solution. All right, let us proceed, gentlemen and ladies. Patriarchy respects its women on this channel. Right. Oh, goodness, that's the wrong one. Oh, man, come on now. Let us proceed. already done this side. Let's go over the other side. What am I doing here? Looking at the chat. It's going to be amazing if we get 16 inches, 2 feet of snow tonight. Paul is on vacation in Mexico right now. Man, that sounds good to me. Mrs. W and I spent a week in Mexico for our honeymoon. We had a great time. The food was amazing. It was super fun. I love Mexico. I don't like getting my head chopped off, but I do like Mexico. No, it's not as good as Mrs. W's cooking. Man, she made a breakfast this morning that was off the fucking fire, as Jack called it. She made buttermilk pancakes with homemade huckleberry syrup that she'd been squirreling away from local huckleberries that only grow in the wild, if you didn't know. So we have some of the best huckleberry fields in the world up here, up in the mountains. And they only grow up subalpine. You can't grow them. It's very difficult. Some say impossible to grow them, to cultivate them. So they're hard to get. They're a little bit about the size of a blueberry, a similar taste to a blueberry, but far more intense. So we had the syrup. Oh goodness, come on now. Eggs, sausages, pancakes. I guess that was it. It is currently 24 degrees. Looks like the barometer might be dropping, and the snow, we're looking at 16 inches to 2 feet potential in the next 24 hours. Huckleberries and morel mushroom. That's right, Noel. That is quintessential Pacific Northwest right there, isn't it? Boy, it's stacking up here. The snowplow. I've heard the snowplows are having a hard time keeping up. You know, they're just like everyone else. They're having problems getting drivers. The guys that are doing it right now are actually putting in quite a heroic effort. Shout out to them. Shout out to the snowplow drivers. it's going pretty good, Captain Davey. It's about the same as yesterday. The temperature, I didn't get above 29 was the high yesterday, so nothing's melted. It's been stacking up this morning. Yeah. Oh, that's the bad thing about Portland is the snow days are far and few in between. Any advice on a long distance relationship? Yeah, just don't do it. It's silly. I mean, it's. I wouldn't trust someone. I would. Yeah. I've never done. I've been involved in that before. I've tried it before. It's always an absolute failure. Goodness, shut it down. We have a super chat from Thomas, and Thomas writes, why did you build your shop so far away? I thought you said you liked stuff being so far away from each other at your old place, so why is it so close to the road? What about burglary? Well, shout out to you, Thomas. I'll tell you while we go over here. So, the shop is actually on a separate piece of property that we own. That we can build a house on. So our hope, Lord willing, is we want to build ourselves a smaller, modest home that's we could heat with a wood stove and just, if you had to go off grid, that was just easier to maintain. And this will be the shop / studio, what mine is now, to our home. And they'll be right next to each other. So the build site will be just on the other side of the Yanmar right there for the home. And then our house now would be the community center for our events. And the shop that I'm in now, or studio I'm in now, would most likely be used for that as well. Well, shout out to you. Thank you for that super chat. We have a super chat also I missed from, goodness, did I miss someone? I thought I did. Nope. Well, shout out to you if I did. Yeah, let's be honest, gentlemen. In these times, if we're talking about modern Western women, and if they're online, like posting pictures of themselves online and such, then the idea of a long-term relationship with you not around it's ludicrous. I don't need to get into what that means, Tim. It's quite clear what it means. It means an unrestricted use and access is what it means. It's just the devious lawyers have just overcomplicated it and twisted around to mean something it wasn't, or they claim it means something that it never was intended to mean. Professional homeowners, we all know what it means. Goodness, we have a super chat from Mr. Joseph Higley, who writes, I thought I saw you had a Nito Terra, I did, I'm sorry, Nito Terra grapplers on my truck. If so, how do you like them? Good performance in snow? The snow, yep, it is. Okay, yeah, so what he's talking about, and shout out to you, goodness, shout out to you, Joseph. I do, those are the tires I have on. Those were not my first choice. I wanted to buy, I was going to put KO2s on because I've used those for decades, and they're really good. They work really good for this environment where there's a lot of snow and sleet and ice. They're rated. They're just a great look, and they're a great looking tire. but I couldn't get them in the size that I wanted. I had a very specific, when I set my truck up, I had some very specific parameters. I'm an old boomer now, and I don't want no stupid lift kits. I don't want inconvenience. I don't want tires sticking out the side of my truck, throwing mud all over everything. I've got to take care of my queen, Mrs. W, and she's always in a dress, so I have to have the sideboards. There's a lot of complications to being a professional homeowner that the single man just cannot comprehend. So with that being said, my criteria was I wanted, because I'm a vain West Coast man, I had to have the stance. It has to have the proper prowess. And what I was going after was I wanted to make it look like a Raptor. I wanted to build a F350, a Super Duty Raptor that was Raptor capable, but on the big body, the big chassis truck. So when we set it up, it does not have any lift in the back. It sits factory in the back, but we did coilovers all the way around, or coilovers on the front, and full king suspension, and we sized those to jack that front up. So that front lifted up probably 4 inches from stock, and now it's got crazy big travel. So it looks kind of cool. It always kind of squats in the back a little bit, but I like that. I like that big front travel, because where that comes into play for me is we just beat a path on these logging roads up here, and they're really washboardy, and there's a ton of and the asphalt's all chewed up on the national forest roads because they don't maintain them anymore. So you almost need trophy truck light just to operate up there, unless you want to start breaking rims and breaking suspension components, unless you want to just creep along all the time. So that's really good for that. So with that being said, I wanted to stick with the factory wheels. I like it to all be stock. I think it's kind of cool. To me, everyone, first thing they do is take all the stock stuff off and all that. I like to leave it all stock, so it looks almost completely stock. But rather than taking off perfectly good wheels and putting usually wheels on that are inferior in quality and strength from the aftermarket, put that money and put that effort into something that is true performance. If you're going to put something in, put it into good suspension, put it into gear changes and locking differentials, put it into, if you live in a country where you're going to have animal strikes all the time, into a buck stop bumper. Put a 16,000 pound winch on there, things that you're going to use, and then you end up with a truck that's super cool because it's got all the factory look to it, like a grandpa truck. But then you look and you're like, how come the front sticking up? It's like, oh dang, it's got Kings on the front of it, and so those little details are cool. So that's the kind of what I was going for. That's a long story to get to the tire size, but the BFGs did not offer, or they weren't available. This was COVID time. Well, they weren't available in that size that I needed. So the Nito Ridge grapplers were. Do I like them? I do like them. I don't think they look very cool. They're okay. They don't look as good as the KO2s, but the performance is really good. They're good on ice and snow. They're very quiet. They have a bit of an aggressive tread. I've got no complaints. They've been excellent tires. They've been actually excellent tires. Probably better than a KO2. I'd buy them again. Yeah, that'd be my recommendation. They're good. Goodness, we have a super chat. Oh, and shout out to you, Joseph. Thank you for your generosity. We have a super chat also from Thomas. And Thomas writes, shout out to you, Thomas. Thomas writes, have you seen the old homestead and all of the work they have done to it and expansion? Yeah, I did. Mrs. W drove by the other day and sent me a picture. I couldn't believe it. They built a big house. Yeah, it was crazy. I drove by before when they were breaking ground. It was last year sometimes. I'll tell you, man, I'm a sentimental creature. I'll admit it. I've always had a very soft heart. No matter, I try to pretend to be hard, but I'm really not that hard. And when I drove by there, I was so overcome with emotion. I have never felt overcome by emotion like that of a piece of property that I can remember. But I just drove slowly and just looking at the bridges that Jack and I built, and there's so many memories there. Mrs. W and I raised Jack there and raised the channel, built the channel there as well. And thinking about it now, it was very emotional. I was very 45-minute drive home or hour home from there. very deep in thought and contemplation from that. It was, I haven't seen it. No, I don't know that I want to. Don't know I'm ready to go back yet. I always look forward, that's kind of to the south there. I look to the north, you know how that is. But thank you for that, for your generosity. I sure appreciate that. Shout out to you, Thomas. And we have a super chat. Goodness, it's hot in here. We have a super chat from Mr. Jason Barr. Shout out to you, Jason. And Jason writes, call me crazy, but there is no way I would get married to a woman who wanted to work a public job. No, absolutely not. No, and that's, that's going to be basically the motto that I would go forward if I was not already married would be, what is it? No kids, no marriage, and no cohabitation. You see, as men, it's the only thing that we have is to withhold resources. That's the only thing. What has happened, our whole civilization and everything around us has turned into a gynocentric utopia, or for them, utopia, where everything is built to support them. There's not hardly a woman anywhere that can't pick up a phone and call the bad boys in blue to come and execute her will, whatever it may be, and she can lie about it or whatever. It doesn't make any difference. These men will come with guns and they will execute her will on demand, anywhere, anytime, pretty much, for the most part. And if we don't need to go into it. We understand what it is. So we can't compete on that level. So the only thing that we can do is withhold resources. So if you don't marry, you don't give them children, and you don't live with them, then that's the only thing that's going to bring about change. Because we can scream until we're blue in the face, but they're not seeing it. They're still blaming us for all the problems. So the only thing we can do and not get in trouble or Me Too'd or canceled or destroyed in some way is to withhold those things. That is the power that we have. Women control sex and men control relationships. And we control the relationships, and the relationship is what they most desire. So get a hold of your biology, focus on yourself and getting yourself correct, focus on getting your spiritual walk cemented and in lockstep with Christ, get your grind figured out what that's going to be, start a business or a couple side hustles, get yourself established, be realistic, have goals, what you want to do, and stop dedicating your energies and your resources to these ungrateful Western women. Here's the litmus test, gentlemen. And it's, if you are providing for a woman currently, right now, I don't care if you're living with her, shacking up, girlfriend, choose not to get married, whatever, and you're the primary breadwinner, that you're going out day after day and putting in 40, 50, 60 hours a week to provide for your family, as a man does, and you are not coming home to gratitude from your woman, wife, whatever that may be, then she's got to go. If you're coming home, if she's not appreciating what you're doing and what you're offering, then you need to start withholding that. You don't need to say anything. I wouldn't, if you see her for what she is, and if that's what's going on, I wouldn't shout, I wouldn't yell, I wouldn't do anything that could cause any sort of a row or that she could ever come back on. I would just simply withhold. Just back away from it and withhold, and focus these resources on your spiritual walk. Enjoy the time that you have to catch up and get up to speed on the 66, so that you are armed with the sword, which is the Spirit, which is the Word of God, and focus on it. It'll be amazing what you can accomplish when you're not spending Friday night, Saturday night, Thursday night at bars or online or chasing or online dating fruitlessly. I can see now why Paul was giving advice. He wrote a letter to the early church. He was a traveling evangelist back in those days, planting churches and set up all over the place. So, a lot of the books in the Bible are these letters back and forth to the church of him giving advice. And then the topic came up of married versus unmarried. And like we said earlier, like men like to do, we like to categorize everything. We want to see who's going to be who's the better Christian. And I don't have a scripture for this, but I can read between the lines, and I would imagine it went something like this. Well, who is closer to God? Who is the better Christian? Would it be the married man that is, defiled himself with the daughter of Eve, or is it the bachelor who has time to contemplate and spend hours in prayer? You know how the argument goes, and each side would make their argument back and forth, and Paul addressed this and basically said, look, it's fine. It's better for you if you're a young man and you're absolutely consumed with passion and desire for women. It's all you can think of, and it's getting in your way, and it's ruining your life, and you can't focus on anything. Then yes, it would be better for you to go get yourself a wife. Take a wife and have her, and what you've done is right and good in the eyes of God. Everything is perfectly fine. Raise up a family, no problem. However, there are men among you that have the ability to push past that, to push past to gain control and mastery over their biology, and they're able to remain unattached. And he basically says this: if I had to pick, all things being equal, and I'm paraphrasing, it would be better for you to follow the latter. It would be better for you to be like me, to be unattached. Because look at the work that I can do. You can imagine, Paul was not attached. He was able to roam freely, and look at the work that he did. Look at what was accomplished. We're talking about him today inside the exoskeleton here in 2022. And Peter, we know Peter and some of the other apostles had family. And you can imagine the difficulties that came along with that. He's wanting to go out and do the work, and he's just received the Great Commission from the Son of God, and he's got to go back home to a sullen wife that's angry at him because he's got to take off and evangelize for another 3 months. It is what it is. I'm not blaming women. It's just the way that it is. I wouldn't want to be left alone with the kids for 3 months either. It's just practical, gentlemen. The gospel and the true word of God, the true religion is practical and usable for us. It's usable. So to answer your question, I guess it depends. It's better for you to marry than to burn with desire, to quote Paul. But if you could get mastery over it, you may be happy to postpone it. And then I assure you, gentlemen, if you're a pureblood and you have got a solid man of faith with the ability to be a leader of your home, a spiritual and a physical leader of your home, and you're established with a solid career or a grind, and you have separated yourself from the world with the decency that comes from walking with Christ, you will have opportunities to have access to women that you wouldn't have before, I assure you. So if that's something you still want or desire, then that's what you can have. Because what the future, monogamy and marriage in its traditional forms, that what we've come to expect and grow up with, by and large is dying, if not already dead, for the generations coming up. It's not going to be the norm, and accessing females is going to be, it's all going to be monetized. It's going to be transactional. It already is transactional, and that will be the future. So I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm not making judgments. I'm just saying that that's what the future brings. That's the way it's going to be. So the opportunity for you to find a suitable mate, if you are in the 5 or sub 5 category on a scale of 1 to 10, is minuscule, unless you're willing to go, mudlarking, to go way, way, way down. Let us proceed, gentlemen. Are we still streaming? I don't know. I haven't seen the chat. Did I lose my chat? Are we all still? Oh, I'm missing super chats. Let me back up here a little bit. The old homestead. Yeah, we have Jason Barr. Yeah, Jason's right. Jason's always right. We have a super chat from Mr. Jason Barr. Again, shout out to you, Jason. And Jason writes, I'm my wife's only fan. Backhoe for any others. I'm my wife's only fan. A backhoe. Yep. We're talking about the website OnlyFans. That's right. That's right. there is something to that. As someone who's been married, it's hard to believe. Married. It's coming up on 20 years, and yet, by God's grace, my bride and I are still boyfriend and girlfriend. We still behave that way. We still. Last night, it just doesn't. You can find the joy. You can find joy in the simplest things, and it's been very fun because when we first got married and we're going through the struggle and getting going. She always supported me, and even in times where we had regressed, where our standard of living had went drastically backwards, where there would have been a lot of women that would have bailed at that point, and thought, I hitched my wagon to the wrong loser. He's not going anywhere. But she didn't, and she never, mistakes that were made that I made. She never held it over my head or reminded me about it, but constantly worked to lift me up and to support me. And as I've always said, one of the most important things that she does is she shows appreciation for me. She shows appreciation for me if I just have to go out into the weather and bring in an armload of firewood. She shows appreciation when I've been out working in the cold all day, not only by her acts, by having a clean and tidy home and herself presentable and looking as cute as a bug's ear, all of those things, but by telling me, letting me know, and I know when I'm out here, when you're out here and you're suffering and your hands are cold, and you're trying to hook up, whatever, we all have our struggles, right? It's a reminder, why you're doing this and why you're here. And also your children, respond to that. They don't respond so much to what we tell them, but how we do it. And the sweet loaf, she's grown up watching her mother treat her husband in that way. And so she reciprocates as well. So not only do I have one, but I have two, greeting me. It's shocking to me. I'm surprised. I wouldn't have believed it. And they always say, people ask, goodness, how could you possibly be content being married to just one woman, just the same meal over and over again for 20, 30, 40 years? I asked myself the same question. I got married relatively late in life, and I thought, like a lot of guys, like, I don't know about that. I don't know if that's gonna work out so well. But it's just, I guess there's just so many years and so many memories and so many times that she's been there and supported and always, made the difference to get you up, push you up over the top. That there's just such a great respect and admiration there that it just gets better. It's just better. I don't look as good as I used to. Mrs. W is not as fit and trim as she used to. But I adore that woman and love that woman, and she's as a great, if not more of a comfort in the evenings than she's ever been. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful you can find it. So I can sympathize. That's what a man wants. I mean, women don't understand. They overcomplicate us. They project their complicated nature onto us, and we're just really not that way. It's really that simple. We just don't ask for that much. But one thing we cannot tolerate, ladies, is to be disrespected and to not be shown appreciation for our labors. You guys know that we will go out and take a bullet for our family. Men have proven that women won't typically do that. In some cases they will, but by and large they're not going to. Men do that repeatedly. Go out, and it might be harder. There's harder things than taking a bullet too. Getting up and going to work and doing a job that you hate for 40 years because it puts food on the table and it gets your kids sent off, hopefully for a better life than you had. I mean, that's heroic to do something like that, to set yourself and your own wants and desires aside for 40, 30 years, to toil, and to do all of that and to come home to ingratitude is unacceptable. I personally, even as a Christian, God takes a very dim view on divorce. He understands He understands what it's like. Divorce to the Christian and how it's really described in the 66 is, or how God would describe it is, it's almost like an amputation. It isn't just, oh, we didn't get along, or we amicable differences, whatever. There's a bonding that takes place between a man and a woman when they come together in the eyes of God in marriage, if you like it or not. And the younger, and if you're virgins, that bondage is especially very tight. The younger you are that it is. I mean, that's why multiple and too many partners is so dangerous, because what it does is you have, God has given us a certain adhesion or stickiness that we have to bond to our mate, to pair bond to a man to a woman. And ideally, if that can be done when you're younger and you both virgins have never shared that or that gift to anyone else, if you can do that at that time, your chance, and this is statistically proven, your chance of a successful marriage is about 80% for people who meet and marry in that environment. The more partners and the more you connect with people, the more that stickiness or that ability to pair bond is diminished. And when you get into the hundreds, then you basically have just destroyed yourself, and you can make yourself so hard, and your ability to attach to a mate is almost impossible in any meaningful way. And the divorce rates we see, when you get into second and third marriages, I saw a statistic recently, college-educated Western white women between 25 and 45 or something like that are college-educated. The divorce rate on second and third marriages with these Western women are like 70 and 90%. To give you an idea. So, and then from a man's perspective, and women maybe don't think about this or don't consider this, or they must not, because of the promiscuity that's going on. The idea of a man that's been with, the idea of being with someone like that is revolting and reprehensible. That behavior is reprehensible. It's revolting. I know I get in trouble get too far, but for me, it's physically revolting. And that's not to say, then the argument will always be, well, then how come their DM's full? How come they've got guys that are blowing up their phone and all that? They're not opposed to slumming. They're not opposed to just using a woman like that. But no one's standing in line to marry anyone like that. And if she's known around the community like that, I mean, to marry someone like that that'd be laughable. I mean, that's just something that you would never do. It'd be shameful. Well, I think back as a kid, all of these rules about sexual purity that they drilled into us, and how they separated us at church, and all these, all the great efforts that was put in to protect these kids from one another, we thought was so unfair and draconian. We were always, working on ways to subvert this, and in our ignorance and our foolishness. And here, here after you go through and get mauled by life and going against, the obvious right and wrong and the teachings of God and what you were raised with, and you go away from it, and now you're 50 and you finally realize it. Like, oh, okay. So God is not giving us these rules because he doesn't want us to have a good time. He's giving us these rules because he doesn't want us to hurt ourselves. He doesn't want us to have divorces and broken families and marriages. He understands the importance of people bonding together and the sanctity of that, and how destructive it can be when you participate in the rewards of that relationship outside of the marriage. But no, I didn't want to hear that when I was 21 and in the club either, did I? Let us proceed, gentlemen. Oh, did I miss a super chat? I probably did. Goodness, I got to back up here. I'm sorry. I'm the worst. We have a super chat from Thomas. Shout out to you, Thomas. Honk the horn for Thomas. Thomas writes, what did you write? Can you do an updated shop tour and talk tools? Yeah, I am gonna do that. I've got all of my chainsaw stuff. I'm going through all of my forestry stuff and rehabbing it. All of the shovels and the wood handles and everything. I'll do that. I'll do a video on that for you. Yes, thank you, and shout out to you. All right, gentlemen, and ladies, let us proceed. Takes a bit to boot up this. Oh, did I miss a super chat? Overton writes, super chat, $5 from Gary SXR. Shout out to you, Gary. Good day from Australia. Love your channel. I wonder what future you wish for the Sweet Loaf, TradCon future, or educated career-oriented future. Okay, so this is from Gary. Shout out to you, Gary. Thank you very much, and thank you for the reminder. Yeah, no, I would want a TradCon. Yeah, I'd like her. You know, since her poor old father, her papa is such an old and decrepit individual. What would be perfect for her is to become my nursemaid and take care of me, as I sit in the corner of my chair with the blanket on my lap. But that's probably not going to happen. No, what I would like best would be for her to fall in love at 18 or so with a local dairyman's, hardworking dairyman's son here across the river, and start having kids as soon as possible. That's what I'd like. No, it's incredible. Look at it. Let's look at this logically. I'm going to lay out the scenario, and I'll let you guys fill in the blanks. You've got a 17, 18-year-old girl in the prime of her fertility and beauty by most standards, right? You're going to, at this time in life, you're going to take her out of the protection of her father and her home and her family, move her to a place far away, maybe even across the country, or even in a different country, and put her in a co-ed environment as a freshman with upperclassmen that are 2, 3, 4, and 5 years her senior, for the most part unsupervised, and completely surrounded in an environment that is antagonistic and contrary to everything that you and your family have taught her and hold dear. Basically, have just thrown her into the lion's den. And that's a good idea. And let's not even talk about saddling her with $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 of unbankruptable student loan debt. TradCon with grandkids, or left-wing liberal college. Let us proceed. I got to get the Yanmar buried. I agree. I do. I was gonna grab my probe and probe around there, make sure I didn't chew something up with a blower. Yes, thank you for the reminder to rotate the blower. Yeah, I'm blowing up snow right in front of myself. That's not very productive, is it? It's like be like a modern day Sisyphus, just blowing snow continually in front of me. Shout out to Sisyphus. Poor bugger. That's your Sisyphus? Is that your nickname? Yeah, it feels that way, doesn't it? Sisyphus. Sisyphus, for those who don't know, is I believe a Greek. Noel, our resident scholar, will correct me if I'm wrong, but a Greek legend of a man that was sentenced to eternal torment, and his punishment was he was to roll a heavy rock up a hill, and right when he was about to crest over the hill and complete his task, hope was taken away from him, and the rock would roll back down to the bottom where he started, and he would continue the process for eternity. Yeah, Noel, when I'm president, I'll make you Secretary of State, and we'll have to see if we can't get someone to sponsor some legislation to make the family courts and everything a little bit more fair and less one-sided, and we'll call it the Sisyphus Law, or the Sisyphus Act. Free Sisyphus. The Sisyphus Act. Yep, that's it. You heard it here first, gentlemen. When the Sisyphus Act is signed by me in the White House, well, we'll actually be in the catacombs under the Denver airport. We will lift the moratorium on our 3 rules of no children, no marriage, and no cohabitation. When all things are fair. It would be simple. We don't need any draconian legislation. We just simply need, if you decide as the man or the woman to blow up a marriage and to walk away from it because you're not happy, you do not leave with cash and prizes. You do not leave. You forfeit your access to the assets of the family, including access to the children as primary custodian or parent. Either way, it works it's fair for everyone. See, it's not difficult, gentlemen. We don't need reams of laws and all of these agencies. We just need some simple common sense rules. The only thing we want is for things to be fair. We'll take our chances, but we need it to be fair for everyone. This is a Caterpillar, I think it's a 249 track loader, compact track loader. Getting in the gravel. Oh goodness, that's a lot of gravel right there. I must have hit the gravel pile. All right, next year, gentlemen, remind me, don't leave any gravel piles to be found under the snow. Let's go see if we can, how tight we can get next to that Yanmar. Goodness, that's ugly. Boy, it's hot in here. Well, I'll tell you, Sad Snow Chad, or Jack, my son, was not happy about his chicken chores this morning and contending with all of the snow. He's never been thrilled about his chicken chores anyway, but we don't pay any attention to that. It's good for him. All right, Operation Liberate Yanmar. At least get the door open. Yep, thanks for the reminder. We don't want to shoot the gravel and break the glass. Oh goodness, we have a super chat from Micah Feld who writes, "Hi Cody, don't leave gravel out for next year." You know, I appreciate that. And shout out to you for that reminder. Let us proceed. We got to turn this as far as we can, not break out my glass. Well, she's chooching now, gentlemen and ladies. Have Siri remind me about the gravel. That would be funny. I've never thought about having Siri do a reminder a year in advance, but there's no reason why you couldn't. That's actually a good idea. All right, we're going to maximum power for this. This is as deep as we can go right here. She is chooching. Goodness. This is maximum chooch right here. We are burning diesel. Oh, did I hit something? Yeah, I love the smell of diesel in the morning. I always love this. I worked as an excavating contractor for many years, and I'm very fond of that. Like there's nothing better than excavating when you're in the springtime before it gets hot and the ground is really tender and soft, and everything smells so good when you start cutting into that fresh earth. Mixed in the morning with the smell of that diesel. It's good. You're right. It's very good. Goodness, we have a super chat from Xavier Goslin. Shout out to you, Xavier. Thank you. And he writes, are you going with RP Race Outlaw pipe or the backcountry? And did not know that pipe are made, yeah, Quebec. Yeah, I did know it was made in Quebec. The guy that built my bike knows those guys or has been working with those guys on these pipes, and I don't know which one between those two models. All I know is it's the one that they've been working and developing for several years that they're running on their own bikes. There's actually, I think we've got 10 bikes with this pipe on it. I don't know if it's a one-off, or if it's a custom, or if it's one of those. But shout out to you, thank you. Goodness, whoop. 2 honks. My neighbors have been inquiring about the honking to Mrs. W. We have a super chat from Xavier Goslin. Or got that one already. Did I miss somebody? Back up. Well, thank you for the gravel reminder, of course. All right, gentlemen and ladies, let us proceed. It's probably close enough. I can crawl that out of there from probably just fine. I think we might, after the stream, I think we might go get a tree. Mrs. W had mentioned something about that. We're going to go up there and be just before the big storm comes. We'll make it just in time. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't already. Subscribe and hit that bell icon. You're not going to want to miss the midnight snow stream. Those are the best ones. I haven't responded to the email. I saw it come in last night. But someone, companies solicit all the time. We get 20, 30 things a day. And most of them you just ignore. But there's something interesting. It's a robotics company. And they have a new product that gives you the ability to operate small equipment, just like what I have, the track loader and the excavator, remotely. And I guess it's really high end, not junk, like really neat, nice stuff. And so I'm going to respond to that. That sounds very interesting, wouldn't you say? I'm trying to think of what the application would be. I mean, could I sit next to my wood stove with a controller and plow my driveway? Would I want to? I mean, we don't want any uncanny valley around here. Is that uncanny valley an automated snowblower? That's not really. Shout out to Uncanny Valley. That might be in our reality soon, if it isn't already. Yeah, dangerous conditions. I can see that as well. No, I can't. You know what that means? So that's the way they'll market it. we need to get these robots into all of the law enforcement in the cities, because we can use these in a hazardous environment. They're going to label out or tread out, the bomb disposal. There's a few things that they just people bring out because they're so effective to us, the sheeple. You'll notice your local zoo. If your local zoo is running low on money and they're having trouble and they're trying to raise money in the community, what do they bring out? They bring out the sea otters. Watch and see. They bring out the sea otters, and then they tell you how the sea otters are getting oily and they need to be cleaned and they need money to do that and to run the local zoo, and people love the sea otters, and so they go and they donate. It's effective. It works. They're going to get these robots, this weaponry into the hands of these police departments. They're already wanting to do it. They're going to have the bomb disposal module on there, and then they're going to have the EMS module, and they're going to show us heroic instances where the robot saved a life in an austere environment somewhere, and how a bomb technician was saved because it was able to defuse the satchel charge in the subway, etc., etc., etc. But what comes with those, and what's already in production and an option that you don't see in the promotional video, is the Dual 50 anti-personnel module that plugs in and is all shares the same mounting points. And who are they going to use those on? Law enforcement is not your friend, gentlemen. Goodness, we have a super chat from On the Water, who writes, "Hey Cody and Tribe, I've always wondered how many acres is the homestead. If you're comfortable sharing that, God bless you and thank you." I'm not. We have a multiple pieces of property. This is the biggest one, but I don't. But thank you. Shout out to you. Goodness, and thank you for your generosity and your super chat. Hopefully, Lord willing, to be much bigger in the future. Let us proceed. 1 million acres. What is my thought on transgender females? My thought is that everyone should have the right to do what they want to do with their own bodies. What do I care what someone else does? Now, when this sort of thing starts becoming mandated and is being used outside of the, supervision, understanding of children's or minors' parents, then we have a whole nother different issue and opinion on that. I said in a comment the other day, a couple days ago, these things in our communities are only allowed to happen. These particular political movements and such is because a strong men allow it to happen. Because strong men don't push back and put an end to it. There's a lot of us. I personally have always. I've never wanted to hurt anyone. I've never been vengeful towards anyone or went out of my way to start in a fight. But I've been in my fair share of fights, and I've bared the scars all over my body from it. I did that for a long time when I was younger, so I understand it. But there's a lot of us that have made the decision, to be traditional husbands and fathers, try to maintain this traditional family, and we have for a lot of us, that's made us somewhat soft. We've gotten out of blue collar work and gotten into more office stuff. But make no mistake, we have violence and simmering in the background and always have. I've always had that there that I could tap into immediately if I found myself or my family under threat. That's not to say that I bring that out first. That's not my primary, but I keep it warmed up and always have. It's very much ready there and on tap for me, and I think there's many of you that are the same way, and we'll need it if it will be there if need be, and you're going to need to be that way. We've become complacent. You've been able to go safely and to and fro and do what you've wanted to do with really out too much threat. I mean, we've known there's been bad areas you stay away from, but now bad areas and violence can randomly come upon you quickly. So you might need to tap into that. So get ready. Oh goodness, did I miss Jamie? Thank you, Overton. Jamie said, I missed super chat from Jamie, who writes, asks any advice on losing your father. I lost mine a year ago and it still affects me. He was such a great guy and passed due to COVID at 64. Shout out to you, Jamie. Yeah, shout out to you. I don't know if I'm in the same boat with you. I lost my father a year ago as well. That anniversary just rolled around not too long ago. And I don't know. I don't know if I have any advice to give you. It's going to take some time, I think. I was really, really close to my grandfather, and I wasn't there when he passed away. And I don't beat myself up about that, or it can't always be that way. If you're fortunate when my dad passed, that my sister and I were there with him. We were holding him in our arms when he passed away, and I didn't understand how important that was to have that, to have been there for that. I understand it now. It's very precious to me to have that. And with my granddad, it wasn't. It was a couple of years before it dawned. It really settled in, and I really was able to grieve deeply for it. I knew it had happened, and I was exceedingly sad, very upset when it happened. But he was an old man, and so I understand this was going to happen. But it hit me maybe a couple of years later. It hit me, and I think it really hit me. I was shooting a video in the old wood shop, and I got something triggered a memory of him, or I was talking about him in the video. The camera was rolling, and it just came upon me, the great sense of sorrow and loss. Just flooded me, just came into me, and I was so sad. I broke down. It was just so sad. I finally, got that out, or that I accepted it at that moment, and I've had more peace about it since then. So, is a guy going to have the same experience with your father? He was just as close as the father, maybe even closer. I don't know. Maybe it was different because I was there and was able to say goodbyes, and my dad was there and conscious of it all. Our whole family was there around him, because that's all you could hope to wish for, right? Is to die in your home, in your own bed, surrounded and being loved by your children. So maybe having a father, loved one pass that way, maybe there's a peace that comes from that. Maybe there's an importance of the rituals that we celebrate for our dead. I don't know. All I know is we've lost contact with these things that help us through the difficulties of life, the difficulties of dealing with loss and sickness and death. There were methods and traditions that our grandfathers not too long ago, 3-4 generations back, had that have been handed down that help us to deal with these things. And when you are tied into your faith, the faith of your fathers, and you're walking with God, and you understand what the future brings, and you understand that death is not the final solution, and that it is not always the last time we'll see our loved ones, that helps a lot as well. I've been to a lot of funerals, and I've been pallbearer in funerals, and I've spoke at funerals, and I've seen a lot of people grieving. I've seen a lot of people grieving also at car accidents and the loss of children and loved ones and such. But I'll tell you this, I've watched funerals from devout people of faith that have lost children. And I've seen devout atheists or non-believers in that same environment that have lost children. And the contrast of the grieving process is very different between the two. I've never seen such sorrowful grieving as that of a woman that doesn't have a walk with Christ, doesn't understand that there's a possibility to be reunited with loved ones. I've never seen grieving as intense as that. I remember one woman just rocking back and forth. Just, we loved you, parents, we loved you so. Just the words, we loved you so. It was good for me to watch that and to see that, to watch someone that had lost something that it could never be redeemed again. Such a tremendous loss. And to die, but to lose a child before you yourself. Watching that and seeing that family grieve helped me to understand what was given at the cross, of what, when Christ stepped down and said, I'll be the one, I'll stand up and I'll save humanity. I'll lead a sinless life, and I'll give this as a free gift to anyone that would be willing to pick it up, put it on. This whole idea of forgiveness of sins and salvation has been so convoluted and so confused, and people live a horrible life in and out the roller coaster of never knowing, am I saved, am I not saved? And I think a lot of people just get tired of it, and they fall away from the faith, not because they've been shown some particular new insight or found something that disproves what they know to be true, but just that they just get tired of the fight. They get tired of not knowing. What happens if I die on a day that I'm not in God's favor? It's simple. You can look at it. It's as simple as this. You can't do anything yourself. You can't make yourself good enough. You can't gut it out, fight it out. You can't fight and get yourself by your own merits into the kingdom. You can't do it. The only thing you can do is just realize that. I've tried it. I can't do it. Damn it, I need some help. God, will you help me? That's where you start. That's where you start right there. And from that point forward, with that simple confession, and it doesn't have to be an elaborate, you have to agree to all this and do all of that. It was so interesting. I was baptized into this. We need to come back to this point, but I was baptized into the Seventh-day Adventist church. And it was a long process before you could join the church. The church we're talking about the wisdom of men, the church had all these rules, and you had to agree to all of them. And you had to sit down with the pastor and study, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think a person needs to have an informed decision before you make it. And if you can have someone kind of walk you through the 66, and we had a very good pastor that understood Mrs. W and I, and we wouldn't be bamboozled by some childish nonsense that we wanted to see some truth and some evidence. And he was intellectual enough to lead us through in a way that we come to see it on our own, independently. But from there, when I decided, well, I'll go ahead and become a member of the church, you had to agree to all of these different rules. And not all of them they're not all biblical. You can argue they're good ideas or not good ideas, but you essentially cannot become part of the church and ultimately, become a deacon or an elder unless you agree to these 20 particular rules. Look how complicated and messy that is. And is it needed? And is it the best way? I don't know. You know, I'm not so arrogant to think that me here looking at it from the outside, that I have some particular, that I know better than they who are actually in there and been dealing with it. Obviously, there has been a need, and they have put these up. Now, is it needed? Or is it a barrier to entry? Well, again, is it about what I think? Or is it about the 66? Again, gentlemen, we need to know the 66. So what does what does the 66 teach us? There's a perfect example. One of the early apostles was traveling across country, and it was the Ethiopian eunuch. The Ethiopian eunuch was running a messenger. Ethiopians were oftentimes, if you had men that were in positions of power, authority, kings or sultans or governors, if they had male servants in the household, they would insist that they were only eunuchs. There were many women and daughters and women folk, dignity. It was a way at the time to protect these women. So this was a common thing that was done. And it was done out of punishment and revenge, and it was a common practice. It's barbaric, but it was the way it was done. So this particular man is on this journey. He's on the road, going from one city to the other, and he's traveling along, and he hears the message for the first time. He's traveling with one of the early apostles, and tells him, lays out the story of the gospel and what happened with Jesus. And after hearing this whole story, this man who had never heard it before, didn't even know who he was, recognized truth for what it was, and looked at this man and said, "Well, you're talking about Christianity, and you're talking about the baptism. What prevents me from being baptized just like you and becoming a member of this, the way, as they called it back then, right now?" And the disciples said, "Well, I guess nothing." And they did it. They went down there and baptized it, and off he went. And this man, who knows, if we were to follow his influence through time, of who he met and who he shared this message with, and what was started because of this one conversation, this one man that responded to the gospel. It's incredible. It's not overly complicated. It wasn't difficult for him. He came and said, "I hear this. I know truth. The sheep and the shepherds." Jesus says, "I'm the good shepherd, and my sheep, they know my voice. And they come when I call. But if another calls them, they won't come. They know my voice." The frequency of God he is calling out to folks right now resonates with his people. If you're hearing it, and you're sitting through these lame, boring live streams, then you're tuned into that frequency. You hear your shepherd, and you need to respond. So where do you respond? How do you respond? Don't let anyone tell you it's complicated. It's no more complicated than that. Realize you can't do it. You need some help. Confess that what you've done. Own up to what you've done. If you haven't always made decisions according to the goodwill of your neighbor or your family or friends, you've been selfish, whatever, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference. And from that point, if it's genuine, that righteousness and that salvation, how do we know? Was I sorry enough? Did I say enough this? Did I repeat the Lord's Prayer properly? It doesn't make any difference, because he did. Picture it like this. He takes that robe of righteousness, which is Christ, and he covers you with it. You're covered in a garment of filthy rags. You're disgusting, covered with oil and dirt and mud, and your fingernails are all you're filthy, vile creature, standing at the foot of the cross, shaking and trembling, asking for forgiveness, in no way deserving access to a righteous God. But here you are. Does he turn you away? Does he say, "No, you need to go back and clean yourself up, go scrub off that dirty face, and then come back and see me when you're a proper man, a proper Christian, you can present yourself in an appropriate way"? He doesn't say that. What did the prodigal son's father say? "Give me the best robe in the house, put it on him. Put the signet ring on his finger." When God at the judgment looks down upon you and your filthiness and your selfishness and your rebellion to him, do you know what he sees when you are safe in Christ? He sees that gleaming, spotless robe of righteousness, and your Savior standing beside you as an advocate, saying, "This is mine. He's mine." Sin has no hold on him. He's not subject. He does not have to pay the penalty, the wages of his sin, which are death. I paid it. And the Father looks upon what he did, and he paid that debt for him. And what does he say to that trembling, wretched man? Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of the Lord. Let us proceed. I can't. My sausage fingers, I can't. There we go. Well, we got a cup about 4 inches in the last overnight in the morning, but we have the mother of all storms heading this way, and we're looking at 16 inches to 2 feet tonight. So it's highly likely, Lord willing, that we'll be doing a midnight snow stream, which of course are the best ones. Hit that thumbs up, gentlemen and ladies. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate that. Keep us in your prayers, please. Yeah, I try to read the chat the best I can. Oh goodness, did I forget? Probably got sidetracked, but we have Overton says we've got a super chat from Kyle B, and Kyle B wrote, "I recommend before the snow comes, you take a video of your property so you can look back where everything is." That is a brilliant idea, Kyle, and double honk for that. That's a good bit of advice. How about sending the drone up, taking a snapshot, and then sending it to the iCloud so I can pull it up on my iPhone as I'm going in real time and like, oh, look out for that gravel pile. Shout out to you for a brilliant idea. Let us proceed. Oh, did I miss another one? Goodness, it's just deplorable. Overton tells me I got another super chat from On the Water, who On the Water wrote, "Hey Cody and Tribe, I've always wondered." Oh no, we read that one. We got that one. No, the snow is not wet. It's 25. It's 25 degrees and quite cold out. And it never got above freezing yesterday, and it's getting colder now. It's going to be a heck of a storm. It's going to be amazing. Best possible scenario for the professional homeowner with an exoskeleton. Goodness, we have a super chat from our friend Mr. Dean Pickett. Shout out to you, Dean. Not much of a fire season up here. How about you? Did you go on any calls? Man, Dean, I had absolutely nothing. I pulled out the fire skid, Jirai and I, and we unweatherized it, pushed all the antifreeze out, and went through all of our kit and got everything going. Nothing. There was nothing happened around here. We had some smoke from a fire over east for a few days, but that was it. It was I didn't even hear anything going on around here. So that's the way that it goes. You never know. You take the good with the bad. But shout out to you. Let us proceed. Yeah, the shipping containers are going to be gone this spring. Still haven't got those garage doors. It'll come. Yeah, I could have Jack read them out to me. Well, I'd say Overton does a pretty good job with keeping me up to speed on those. Shout out to Overton. And shout out to FedEx that they'll be delivering the disc brake hub that I need to get the Yeti going for this epic snowfall this weekend, coming from our friends at Quebec. The snow, it's definitely warming up. The snow is getting, it's definitely getting heavier. It's clumping up a little bit more. Oh, the snow biking is going to be, like, to go out tomorrow morning, Saturday morning. Oh, I haven't the words. Jack and I got that last fall. We were up ripping the log. We couldn't get off the logging roads because there's not enough base yet. There's too many hazards. But we had a blast. We were ripping down these logging roads, and we climbed up high, up to like 6,500 feet, and it was just like a Mario Kart, like a Mario Kart on a snow track. We were just like two little kids having a blast. Yeah, the new barn's gonna be nice. Goodness, we have a super chat from Galathius, who writes, "Do you normally get a good amount of snow everywhere here? Here in Kansas, we don't get much. It's been pretty warm for us this year." Yeah, this plate actually right here. Now, I was told by the locals here, by a couple people I trust, they said this area gets more snow than any place in the state traditionally, and that's a big state. Right, so there's pictures of snow up to the eaves of houses and shops. 10 feet back in the day, they get huge snow. The road looked like a corridor, like a tunnel. So it's definitely possible. We could have 5 feet on the ground in 24 hours. It's possible. Shout out to you. Oh goodness! But shout out to you, our good Midwest friends. Galathius. And we have a super chat from On the Water. Shout out to you, On the Water, who writes, "Did you get the kits for the shop buildings online?" No. We used so this was existing. It's a all steel building, commercial heavy duty building with a tremendous snow load. We have to have ridiculous snow loads up here because it's free span and all that. So it was already here. The original idea was to add on to this one, to double it, and so I just copied it. We contacted the company that builds these. They're just up not too far, just a couple hours from here, and we put it into production and had it built. So when things started to change and our plans started to change, we pivoted on that and put it over there, and now made that will be the new shop for our small home. And then this one I'll probably relocate over there. So no, we didn't get the plans. We just told them what we wanted, roughly the size, and you pick out the door configurations and such, and then they determine what your snow load is if you have snow, how many pounds per square foot or per square foot of roof space. And I think we're like at 148 pounds or something to that effect. And then they'll engineer it to support that. So shout out to you. Let us proceed. Oh, we're not proceeding anywhere. We have a super chat from Ingrained Outdoors, who writes, "Is it me or is common sense not common? I'm 29 and can't connect with cohorts. I grew up in Idaho and feel like every everyone was 10 years behind everywhere else. Yeah, no, you're not alone. You know, that is the weapon of the adversary, is to get you to question your core beliefs and to question your sanity. And that's why our Lord told us in those final days, do not be deceived. If you're not real strong in your faith and your convictions, the continual press, the tide of culture and the change of all these things will press upon you to the point where you just get tired of fighting it, and you'll just knuckle under and like get what is it? Get along, give to get along, or and that's what people will do. They just get tired of fighting because it's an effort. If you're going to put your hand to the plow and going to be a soldier of Christ, you're going to fight. You're going to have to train, and you're going to have to not compromise on these things. So this is an attack to question whether or not you are resolved and you're resolute in your faith. And most will not be there. The good book tells us about the final days of how many will make it. And Christ tells us, is narrow is the way and few be that find it. And that's a pretty sobering thing to hear when you think about the world population. And we've clearly told and warned that narrow is the righteous way, narrow is the way, and few be that find it. One of the greatest stories, a story that brings no end of comfort to me, is the story of one of the stories from the Pilgrim's Progress. Now, that's a book that is on the mandatory reading list for professional homeowners. You need to be reading Pilgrim's Progress, Mere Christianity, and the Screwtape Letters. John Bunyan wrote the Pilgrim's Progress. He was not an educated man. He was self-taught, self-educated. He was a preacher, traveled around, and was actually imprisoned for his faith. And I believe, if my faulty memory serves me, he wrote Pilgrim's Progress while in prison. Now, this is a book that many hold, I would say, there's no question, not on the same level as the canon of the 66, but certainly complementary, and it maintains that space somewhere between not official canon, but also not uninspired as well. Kind of like the Law of Moses and the Ark of the Covenant, where the 10 Commandments that were written with the very finger of God sat in the Ark of the Covenant. What else was in there? Who else knows? Do we have any men of the book here? What was inside the Ark of the Covenant? Aaron's rod that budded forth with almonds. Aaron's rod was there, and what else? And a bowl of manna. On the outside, like in an envelope, on the outside of the Ark of the Covenant, were the laws of Moses. Now, there's a reason why they were not inside with the 10 Commandments. They didn't hold that same standard. They were not written by the hand of God. These were for the setting up of the government, for God's government, for how God's people, how Moses has to deal with a million or so people when you're coming out of 400 years of slavery, and you basically have a million excess people that have the intellect of children. And we're fighting and squabbling, right? So you have to have a government. So although it's important, it's right there, the Law of Moses attached to the Ark of the Covenant. It's not inside, is it? So that's kind of where I don't mean to be irreverent here, but I'm trying to paint a picture for you of the importance of this. Theologians and scholars and the fathers who have studied the Word of God have marveled for years of how this man, this uneducated peasant, self-proclaimed preacher, was able to pen and create this brilliant work of art. And what the Pilgrim's Progress is an allegory of a story of a young man by the name of Christian who, what it's telling is basically laying out the Christian walk from start to finish, what it's like. From the very moment you realize, man, I'm not a very good person. You start to realize and become self-aware of your sin and how it's separated from God. And that moment you start trying to make that journey back to God and ultimately are looking for redemption and salvation. It is laid out in the story of Pilgrim through his many adventures as he travels on his way to the Holy Land, to the mountains. In his travels, he's going up this mountain path. it's exposed, it's ragged, dangerous, windblown. It's terrifying in every way, but he presses on, going forward, knowing he's on the right path. Danger on the left, danger on the right, but he moves forward. Coming down the path, someone ahead of him, running down the screaming warnings and of doom and peril, is a man telling him, turn back, there's death ahead. There are lions up there, run for your life. And this man screams by, running, really shaking Christian's resolve, as you can imagine. He was already had some misgivings about going up this path anyway. And now here comes this lunatic running down saying that there are wild animals up there. And here this unarmed man marches forward. Well, he slows his pace down and creeps along until he can finally, behind the boulder here, I'm embellishing, of course, look up there and see, indeed, there are two lions up there, and they're barring his way from the path from going any further. What's the point? It's too dangerous to go forward. The man told him so. Obviously, who is he to go forward and to press forward? But the word, God's Spirit presses him forward, and he goes forward on the promise. God promised that he wouldn't allow anything to happen to me. He promised that I'll be able to do this. And although it doesn't make any sense to me right now, and it looks like if I step forward in faith here that nothing good can come of this and I will be devoured and torn by these beasts, yet I go forward because I trust God. That's what faith is right there. Faith is those times in life when you're not sure why he wants you to do this, and you can't see whether it makes any sense, but you do it forward because it's in his will. And you trust him to be a good father and to show you what's what when you get there, right? That's really what faith is. Faith is not blindly believing nonsense and children's stories and fantasies of men in the sky, hoping that it's true and that in the chance that you happen to be on the right side and when you wake up that you made the right decision. That's not what faith is. Maybe for a lunatic or a moron, but a thinking, intelligent, clever man needs evidence and proof. We need to see these things. But there are times that God will make us step out of our comfort zone, and that's where faith comes in. In those situations where he wants to see, will you go? How much do you trust me? You say you trust me. You pray earnestly. Will you trust me if it starts to hurt? But the story, as it goes on, as he has this fight in his mind, trying to get mastery over his fear, but also wanting to trust his God, he ultimately gets mastery over this and he creeps forward, going forward very slowly, only to realize that those two lions are tethered. They're chained, and they cannot reach the trail. And if Christian, 1 inch steps off that trail as he passes, they'll shred it, they'll devour him. But if he stays on that straight and narrow, he'll be able to pass safely between those two. So what appeared to be a great obstacle and something that was insurmountable to Christian and to the man before him, it wasn't that big of a deal. And God had made a path for him the entire way. But the opportunity that we miss out on, that we lose when we don't respond to that we don't move forward in faith out of our comfort zone, is there's only so many of those that we have. And when you've been given so many over the course of your life and you've refused to respond to them, then God has no other choice but to simply let go of you. And that's why you're lost. That's why people are lost. Let us proceed. I didn't. Battle Chemist, I did not get the iMac in. I was hours at the chiropractor, and I missed my appointment. So Mrs. W and I, we were actually supposed to go back in today for a second visit, and we were going to do it then, but we're in a storm warning. I think we are, or there's one coming up about that 2 feet, 16 inches, 2 feet of snow tonight. So we are definitely not driving through the gorge in that. It's some of the most treacherous driving in the country in that type of weather. So we'll do it next week. So I told Mrs. W we're going to, since I've got to go back anyway, I'll take her with me next time, and we'll make a date of it. And I'll take her out to our favorite restaurant. I think we're going to have a white Christmas. Mrs. W, she just left. She started a local cross-country ski group with a bunch of ladies. I think she said she had 16 ladies that signed up for it. So she was really excited about that. And one of the local farmers either bought or built, I think he built a grooming machine, and it got ran over last year and damaged. So he said he's got it in the shop. And he might, I think he said he'd be able to start building, grooming the tracks for the ladies today, maybe. So they're looking forward to that. So we got miles and miles of the local farmers open up their fields, and then they groom perfect, smooth. He's got a big roller he built, and then it's got the ski tracks in it to push the perfect ski tracks in, like they have the Olympic width. And then everyone gets to ski on it. It's fabulous. Not to mention all of the U.S. Forest Service, the miles and miles and thousands of acres up on Fuji that are maintained as well. So it's a real great place for backcountry and cross-country skiing. No, Sad Chad has not brought coffee out. I wish he would. My kingdom for a cup of coffee right now. Yes, I have had good results from the chiropractor. He's all checked out. He's pretty skookum. He's got a really good clinic. He had full access. He could do X-rays there and everything. So we did a full set of X-rays on my rib cage, spine, jaw, neck, everything, and it was a disaster. So I was there for multiple hours. He was working on 3 different things, but he put my rib back in. My rib was out from the crash, and then my neck is all, my spine got all jacked up. It's pinching the nerves and making my feet and hands go numb. So he's working on that, but that'll take a couple visits. I waited too long. When you do that sort of thing, the way to do it, if you have an injury, or you go immediately. But I don't do that. I wait and suffer and farm sympathy for Mrs. W for a month or two until it gets to the point where I start to become decrepit, and then I go in, and then he shames me, and then we have to go through the process, and it takes a lot longer than if I would have went the next day or within a few days of the incident. But that's why men live longer, or that's why women live longer than men, because that's what we do. Yeah, the only reason Chad gets a break is because I can't call him and order coffee right now because I'm streaming on my phone. is a man's man for better or worse? I don't know what that means. I thought there might be something thought-provoking there, but I don't know I'm tracking with you. I think I'm not picking up on what you're laying down there. I do not think well, you might be right about carpal tunnel. Mrs. W she was kind of going down that line as well. I don't think carpal tunnel because it started from vibration. My hands went numb after I crashed. That's as simple as that. That's where I'm starting from. So something happened. We'll see. You could be right. Well, I'll go through the process and we'll see if Mr. Miyagi is right, Dr. Miyagi, or if it's going to be something else. But the Lord reminds me that my grace is sufficient for thee. It's easy to lament, to feel sorry about how you can't do what you used to do, but you're going to open, there's going to be a new chapter of life that opens up. There's going to be everything and all the frustrations and the aggravations and experiences are going to be needed to pull upon, to draw upon for some work that He has for us in the future. Maybe it's nothing more than it'll just make us relatable to our fellow men. Like, I don't want to hear war stories about wildland firefighting from someone that wasn't there. Just like someone that's been in combat doesn't want to hear about what combat's like from someone who's never been there. The more hardship and experiences we have, the more we have, the greater our ability is to be compassionate towards people and sympathetic. I couldn't be sympathetic towards someone losing a father until I lost my own, and now I can. I could sit with someone who loses their father today and understand what they're going through and sympathize with them. I know exactly what they're going through. But before, I may have tried to come up with platitudes or something to fill the void of the empty space that's uncomfortable as I'm trying to do something, whereas now I could just sit quietly with someone and just relate. If you're coming to the faith late in life, do not think that you are coming as a second-class citizen and that your standing with God or standing in the church is going to be less than someone that may have been born into it that is multi-generational. Is that because I think so, or do we have scripture for that? We always go back, see, professional homeowners back up what they say with scripture and stories from the Savior. It's not about what I think. It doesn't matter what I think. It's about what God said. There's a perfect example. Jesus is eating. Jesus tells us a story. It's a great story of a wealthy master, and he. Which story do I want? There's two about that. These two stories are about my favorite. I want to choose the right one. Simon is sitting. He's a man. He's in proximity with Jesus. He's sitting at they didn't have tables in those days, but he was invited over. Jesus was invited over to have dinner with these important men of the city. And they were reclining as they did at dinner. They didn't have tables like we have today. They would have, the Eastern man of the day would have come in, and the first thing he would have done is taken off his shoes, and there would have been a bowl there. If it would have been a more modest family, there would have been a bowl there. And the least in the family may have offered to wash the stranger's feet, or the stranger may have washed his own feet. Or if you were a wealthy man, you would have had even a slave or a servant that would have done this. It would have been considered to have been the lowest job in the household, to wash one's feet. Never something an important man like Simon would have done. So he's reclining, and they're listening, and they're having a nice evening with Jesus and hearing about all this and asking questions, I can imagine. And all of a sudden, this woman comes in, pushes her way in, unwanted, a woman of ill repute. And Simon knows who this woman is, and all the men at the party know who this woman is. And she is the town bicycle, for lack of a better term. That explains it. Prostitute, the whore. She comes in and she falls weeping at Jesus' feet, and she breaks open a box of ointments, very costly, very expensive. Now, I don't know the cost. We could probably go look into it, but imagine maybe it was a month's wages for someone. So what is that? That could be worth $4,000, $5,000, $6,000. Not something you would throw away lightly. She falls at her Savior's feet. She knows who she is, and she anoints his feet with this costly oil, and starts to weep and cry and to wash his feet and dry his feet with her hair. She's completely surrendered herself. She is a broken woman, and Christ is sitting there letting it happen. Now all these men are watching this happen at the table, and these are all devout, important men. Men that wouldn't have this woman even in their midst, this filthy, unclean thing. And I'm going off of memory here, but I think Simon thinks to himself, if Jesus really was the Messiah, he would know exactly who this woman is, and he wouldn't have this filthy woman touching his feet. He right there was questioning who Jesus, if he was who he said he was. So Jesus knows what's going on, and he knows exactly what Simon is thinking in his mind. And rather than rebuking and embarrassing Peter publicly, calling him out for being so hard-hearted against this woman, because Christ looks upon the heart. He sees that this woman is sincere. He doesn't rebuke her. That's an interesting thing in itself. The Gospels are very deep and rich if you start looking at it, especially when you start looking at it from the perspective and the wisdom that comes from the fear of the Lord, prayerfully looking at it. But you see, Jesus would have well been within his right to rebuke this man many times, to call them out publicly, to embarrass them, and they would have deserved it, and it would have made a really good point. But would have won the person, or would have it just created an enemy? So is this an example of how we should deal with people like this? So how did he deal with it? Well, he came with a story. He says, Simon, let me ask you something. There was a man that had money. He loaned money to folks, and he had a couple servants, and servant came to him, and one borrowed $1,000, and another servant came to him, and another borrowed $1 million, and off they made their contracts, and they had a year to pay this off. Well, at the end of the time, when it came to repay these debts, the guy that had bought I'm paraphrasing here. I'm not going to keep saying this, but just understand this. The one that had 1,000 came back and with his hat in his hand and says, sorry, I can't pay this. I just don't have it. The crop didn't come in. I just don't have it. I don't have the $1,000 to pay. Well, the master was very magnanimous and gracious, and he understood the situation, and he forgave him his debt, right? Well, the other one, the same with the one with $1 million, and he goes. It's a long. We can get into the story at another time, but the point that Christ makes on this, and the point that I want to make is that when he goes to Simon and says after this story, one person was forgiven a tremendous amount, and one person was given actually a pretty small amount. Which one is going to love his master more? Which one is going to be more devout? And Simon answered his own question. He said, well, the one that you forgave more. He's going to be the one that has the greater capacity and appreciation to love you, and the greater appreciation for you. There was more at stake there. And that's the point that he made. And what he's telling us is that if you have been on the wrong path and haven't walked with God, or you weren't fortunate enough to be born into a family that taught you these things when you were a child and got you started off on the right path and sent you into the cold, hard world unprepared, and you are still here and you're still on your feet and you're still fighting, you're with me. I was out there too. You're with me. There's nothing anyone can do that I can't have sympathy for and appreciate, because I've either experienced it or seen it or been around it. And it could have been me. So our ability, gentlemen, those of us who came to the faith late in life, that got out and got mauled in the world and understand what it's about and what's capable of, are far more effective soldiers for Christ in many situations than the churchman that never took a drink or never stuck a needle in his arm. You know, what good does a teetotaler, what advice does he have for me when I'm struggling with alcoholism? What advice does the man who's never struggled with gambling or pornography, how's he going to relate and help me? What is he going to tell me if he's never struggled with that? So don't see yourself as a second-class citizen. Look at yourself as a special forces. You've been through the training. You've been through the hard training that can only be achieved by great personal loss and tragedy. And you come out of that very strong. You come out of that a very different person. So we're training special forces over here for the kingdom of God. I don't know what you guys are doing, so don't be discouraged. Come now. You know, it doesn't matter how far you walked, how far you left, even if you knew him at one time and you've walked away. Sometimes that's the hardest way to come back, is when you've tasted the goodness of God. You've tasted what it's like to be in his presence and to experience his peace in a daily walk with him, and yet you turn back to the filth. God tells us it's like a dog turning back to his vomit. The man that has tasted the goodness and the peace that comes from knowing Christ, who turns back to the things of the world, is like a dog that turns back to eat his vomit. That's a revolting thing, but that's what it's like. But I've returned. I've eaten the vomit. I'm not alone. But stop eating the vomit. All right, let us proceed. We're going to finish this main spot out here, and we're going to shut her down. No, I ride a lot of I ride pavement. I've always had street bikes. I know all of I know it. I get it. I prefer the off-road. But I ride my 300 on the road all the time. Our bikes are all plated. I rode it to Canada twice. Mr. Landfill says, leave us all faucets open. Sometimes water will seep past the shutoff. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, we already did that. We winterized all that stuff a couple weeks ago. But thank you. Shout out for that reminder. We do not have Golden Dog. We did not enjoy that particular breed. It was far too energetic. So Golden Dog lives next door to our friend Peter and Catherine. They adopted Golden Dog, and Golden Dog is as happy as ever. Actually, we just saw her the other day on the road. So she is in good hands. She's with a younger family that has more energy. Let us proceed. All right, Mr. Landfill, I'm going to shut it down myself. It's good to have you here, and do well today. Whatever your hand finds to do it with all your might. Unless, of course, you're working for the federal government. Then do no more than what is required of you. Oh, goodness, I missed another super chat. Good grief. From Galathius, who wrote, my dad at 65 tore his shoulder pulling an engine pallet by hand, and instead of going the day off, he went days after, which put him out of commission for 6 months. Well, that's exactly right. And Galathius, Thank you, Goliathus. Thank you for your generosity, and shout out to you. Yeah, you're right. I don't know why we do it. Women don't do that. Mrs. W, if she ever has an issue, she addresses it immediately before. She always says a stitch in time saves 9. But men don't operate that way. All right, let us proceed. Thank you for that, and shout out to you. Because that was very generous of you. Goodness, we have a super chat from GLG Forgeworks. We better shut it down for GLG. Prayers as always. Love the live videos. Well, shout out to you, GLG, of course. It's good to see you back. Thank you for your generosity. I'll take you guys on a little, I guess maybe we should go into town and see if we might need to blow the driveway of a couple friends. Do we have time to do that? Mrs. W wanted to go get a Christmas tree today, and it'll be dark in 2 hours. And I don't think she's back from skiing yet. What should we do? I think I'm too late for the coffee shop. I think it shuts down at 2. We missed that opportunity. Now, I've got to take issue with you. Now, you absolutely just triggered me with that comment. We do not use the term happy wife, happy life on this channel. Happy wife, happy life is a beta male mating cry of some sort. We don't do that. My happiness and the professional homeowner's happiness is not based off the whims of a woman. A woman's happiness should be based off her husband's happiness and what he's got going on with the family. It's the other way around. I do not live and make decisions and kowtow and sacrifice and scrape to keep a woman happy as the foundation or the center of my life. That needs to be stricken from your vocabulary, gentlemen, and never used again. Happy wife is not happy life. Happy wife is oftentimes very happy and miserable husband. I mean, the way to describe the majority of husbands that are married to women like that are demanding and put themselves first and narcissistic, is an existence of quiet suffering. Or quiet, what is it? I heard it described. It's an existence of quiet desperation. 10, 20, 30 years of quiet desperation, happy wife, happy life. No. There's no doghouse in my home. If I'm going to have a fight, I'm not sleeping on the couch. I'll sleep in my own bed. And if I have a disagreeable woman that wants to stomp her little feet and have a temper tantrum, then she can go sleep on the couch. But I'll be sleeping in my bed with my pillows as normal. I won't have any of that. First off, no one's going to bed until all of this is resolved and tolerated. I'm not going to put up with those little childish reindeer games. Grow a pair of balls, gentlemen. Accept the masculine role that has been given you. Be lead of your household, but lead in kindness. It's, what women oftentimes don't understand, the burden of leadership that comes along from it. Not only the spiritual aspect that comes along with it and the expectations that are, or the extra requirements that are leveled upon me being responsible for the children and the wife that's been given me. But also a good leader, puts his family first. Make sure that, yeah, I'm a soldier. I can jump in my truck with a duffel bag and a rifle or hook onto my trailer, and I can drive 24 hours. I can be anywhere in the country in 5 days. I can be and adapt and be mobile and cover a tremendous number of roles by myself if I'm left uninhibited, right? It's different to go and to do something like that when you bring your family along. I have an obligation. I can't do it the way that I would do it on my own. I could just say, this is the way we roll. This is my way or the highway. Duffel bags are not to exceed 18 pounds and not to exceed this amount of space, and you have 23 minutes to be ready, and we'll be traveling here and there. I could do that, but is that the way to lead? Is that the way that a husband should do it? No. We make concessions. Everything that we do, and women may not realize this, as good husbands, good men, Christian men, professional homeowners, is making our life easier for our women. We invented washing machines. Our women don't have to go out into labor and to wash like they used to. They can just throw clothing in a hole. You know, a lot of them complain about their daily duties, but really we've made it as easy as possible for them, where machines do all the automation and they don't have to start fires anymore, and we've got furnaces and good warm bedding, and all these things we've made to make our women more comfortable, and we're happy to do it. That's what we do. We like to do that, and we'll do it forever until you start disrespecting us and start expecting it. And the moment we start to realize that we're not being appreciated, then that's what we're getting today. We're not being appreciated for what we've done and what we do, for the heroic effort that is involved with going to work and raising kids for year after year. Not to say that the woman's not sacrificing either. But us men need to know why we're getting up and putting work boots on and going out into the rain again. We need to know why. And the reason why birth rates are low and the reason why marriages are not developing and men are walking away from this is because we're starting to realize this. We're just not going to be, we're not going to take it forever. We've taken it for a long time. We're just not going to deal with it anymore. So that's where the walking away comes from. That's the only tool that we have to get daughter of Eve back to the negotiating table so she can see and realize, wait a minute, this has been one-sided. Maybe this hasn't been fair for you guys. Maybe we do need to enact the Sisyphus Act. And I hope I can count on your support for my election. I think by now the statute of limitation has ran out on pretty much everything that might come back to haunt me that I couldn't explain away anyway. Mrs. W is back with her ladies, so we're going to wrap up here, and we're going to shut down the stream. Yep, I think it's a good time now. All right, gentlemen. Brent Gilbert, Quiet Desperation. Yeah, was that was the quote from? I didn't remember who that was from. It's brilliant. Though we have a super chat from Mr. Tank Liquid. Shout out to you, Tank, who says the King. That King Von short you made was hilarious. Yeah, I like hip hop music. Always have. Is it demonic? Absolutely. But you also need to know what the enemy is up to. Now, that's careful to it's dangerous to operate behind enemy lines. I'm going to break here. Because if you're not strong and understand what's going on, you can get consumed by it. But music is very, very important, is a very, very important component and aspect of worship. How do I know this? Again, is this my think so leading you guys astray? No, we go to the 66. How do I know that? How do I know that music is a vital, important component of worship? Well, we have to look at what was going on. If you were in the presence of God before the fall, before Lucifer's fall, what did worship look like? Well, we know that Lucifer was one of two covering angels, created more beautiful and more elaborate and more capable and more talented than any of God's other creations. He was actually given the honor to sit at the very next to God as a covering cherub. Represented by actually the two covering cherubs, if memory serves, on the Ark of the Covenant. If you watched Indiana Jones, there's a representation of the Ark of the Covenant. It's not far from the truth. It was very similar to that. And at the top in gold was the casting of two angels' wings that covered what they called the Shekinah. And in the early days, when God dwelt with the children of Israel, when they were coming out of Egypt, the Shekinah, or the very presence of God, actually sat in visible form to the high priest once a year, the Shekinah glory hovering. I'm just trying to imagine the unimaginable here and explain it. Hovering, the power of God between these two angels on this lid, the box. And that's what if you go back to the original language, the translation is the lid. Some translations is the mercy seat, which is kind of interesting. But the translation, if I remember right, was the lid. And the interesting thing about this, that this is an example of God's kingdom and his throne right there. So in the kingdom, at that time before Lucifer fell, Lucifer was one of those angels, a covering, almost like a honor guard for the Almighty. And it gives very specific instructions when God is talking and is lamenting about Lucifer and about how sad he was and how tragic it was that Lucifer lost his position as a covering cherub, and that his pride came up and he began to become jealous of God, and he looked at himself, and God had created him so beautifully that he began to exalt himself and think that he was the same as God, and and ultimately participate in the ultimate betrayal, where the created thing asks its creator to bow down and worship it, as he did in the temptation of Christ. Right? So that's how far his hubris and his pride went, where he even asked his own creator to bow down and worship him after the 40 days of fasting in the wilderness. Incredible. It's incredible, isn't it? Just to give you an idea of this being's hubris and pride and arrogance. But in this description, we can peek behind the curtains and see a little bit what's going on. He makes reference to, almost you could get the impression from reading it, and most people do, that his very body was a musical instrument. It refers to your pipes and such, and it's using very crude language, trying to explain the unexplainable to a primitive Eastern man. But all they could do was use analogy of musical instruments that they had access to at the time. So don't underestimate the grandeur of this Lucifer, light bearer, who became the devil and Satan before the fall. He was basically the band leader. It's that him and the other, was it David or Michael? Michael the archangel, the other? The band leaders of worship. And worship was very, very important. And those of you who are of, this can become insufferable when you start getting into creative types of people. There's a lot of creatives, people that you may not know this, or you may know this, but the people that work in creative industries like arts, advertising, music, recording artists, actors, anyone who does creative type of work, I think a lot of them think themselves to be have a special gift that the rest of the plebs don't have. And that no one could really understand other than fellow creators of how much they feel. And they talk about it all the time. There's quotes you'll see, no one really understands how hard it is for people who can feel so much or feel as much as I am. You're always seeing that from female recording artists and such, right? It's insufferable. It's the worst thing. But there is some truth to that. The spiritual component and the spiritual component of worship is so important. You see that when you see how David ran his kingdom. And David was a musician. And David was a man after God's own heart. And in the insights to the heavens, that this worship in incorporating music is so important to it. And musicians, when you're around them and you start being around them, they just have to play. If you don't have that bend and you're not musical, you just don't understand it. But musicians, the reason why they make little bands and they find one another is because they have to. There is something that God has put in them that has to get out, that has to be expressed, that has to be shared, that is so important. It's everything that they need that. And I think it's the problem with sin in this world is that these gifts that God has given us, the gift of music, the gift of hospitality, it could be the gift of patience, it could be the gift of oration, of preaching, evangelism, whatever that may be, ultimately can be used for good or it can be used for bad, but it will be used. You can't help but, if it's in you, you have to use it and you have to express it. God created Lucifer with every possible ability, his greatest creation, as even internal musical instruments, with the intention that these would be used for good in lifting up and honoring and worshiping God. And Lucifer took these incredible gifts, these abilities, and flipped them and used them to fight against God. So there you have it. Right there is the free will. So the more responsibility you have in life, the more consequences you have and the more precarious is your journey. An insect can only be so bad. I think C.S. Lewis talked about this. You know, it can only do so much damage. It can sting one person and it'll most likely die, and that's what it can do. It can't destroy the world. It can't really affect people's lives. It can be as bad as it can be. It can be the baddest insect in the pond, in the fetid waters, but it can only be so bad. A military-age man, can be worse. He can cause more destruction. He can use his strength, his ability to shoot and fire and drive vehicles and create and invent and improvise to do good or bad. He can make decisions that can completely affect his entire family, or if he's in a position of power, entire nations. So his ability to do bad or to do good is exponentially increased according to his position in life. Now, if we fast forward that up to a superhuman angel, an archangel, who God also respects so much that didn't take away his free will to do what he wanted to do. He has the potential to take those abilities, those spiritual gifts that God gave him, and use them to fight against the army of God as well. So there's a lot going on, gentlemen. So if you're on the outside, you know, looking, oh, it must be nice, the patriarchy, it must be nice to have this role and the liberties that come with leadership, but the consequences far outweigh any benefits that you will receive, and it's a heavy burden to lay upon a man to do, and we'll give an account for it. I think we'll give an account. You know, if we've lost our children, I don't know. There's a lot of, it could happen to me, you know, it could happen to any one of us. You can raise your kids the best you can, and all of a sudden they fall away, or they just don't accept what it is that you teach them, and they don't see things the way that you see them. And you can think back and wonder, did I do everything that I could have? Did I fail them in some way? Well, we had to look to the Bible again, look to guidance. You know, what does it say about that? Well, so convincing was Lucifer with his argument that God was unjust, that 1/3 of God's created angels sided with him and went against God, and 2/3 remained. So God lost a third of his children. So it would be like us, if we had 3 children, he lost 1. And we could only imagine he was the perfect parent. Gave them everything that they wanted, gave them every opportunity, was honest and fair with them, and yet Lucifer was so convincing that he convinced 1/3 of them to go against what they knew. So if you ever wonder why God doesn't stomp out evil and just snap his fingers and make it go away so that the rest of us can go through life without all of this suffering and aggravation, of those 1/3 that sided with Lucifer, do you think of the 2/3 that remained, do you think there were some that were questioning? Maybe he had some good points, but just weren't quite ready to go there. And if God had just assembled everyone together and said, I'm going to put an end to this here and now. I am God. I said it, and you must believe it. Therefore, I will root out this rebellion, and snap of the finger, the 1/3 and the Lucifer and his confederates are all just banished, gone, destroyed. Problem solved, right? We rooted out the evil. took it out root and branch. It's never going to come back again. Never rear its ugly head again, right? But in the 2/3 of those that were not maybe quite convinced, what is that? What message did that just tell them? Oh, I see. You either do what I say or I'll kill you, or you'll kill me. I see how it is. Are they going to pay lip service next Sabbath at worship? Is their heart going to be in it? Or will they be seething and bitter with resentment of how God destroyed all of those people just on a whim? And now they are serving a tyrant out of fear, but not out of love. If we want to back up and stop thinking about ourselves and our personal salvation for just one moment and then zoom out and look at the big picture, as some people call the great controversy, the controversy between God and Satan. God has called into a question. God's not just, he's not worthy to rule as he does. I say that I should be. I think he should bow down and worship me. And God says, no, what I've told you is true, and everything my commandment stands, and I changeth not. God says, let's see. Let's let it play out. Shakespeare said, all the world is a stage. And here we are on the stage, playing out the question, the great controversy. Is God worthy to rule the kingdom, or was Lucifer right? And the devil and his angels were cast down and limited, their area of operation is limited to this earth. And we will see. He has set up his kingdom here. He is running it as he sees fit. And the whole world is looking on. You know, there are other fallen worlds that are looking on that never were separated from God. And do you think there are not questions with them as well? Also, we're watching the whole thing unfold. We're watching Lucifer's government crumble into what we're living in today. And when everything is said and done, when it all grinds to a halt, and God says, enough, I'm not going to suffer this to continue any longer, and the Son of Man returns in glory to redeem those who have accepted the free gift of salvation, then we will see. Everyone will see, God, you were right. Not because you said so, but because we see with our own eyes. We see the result, the fruit of the devil and his government. It has brought the whole world to destruction. Look at the violence. Look at the travesty. Look at the brutality. They even sacrifice and eat their own children. There will be no question. And rebellion and sin can never again crop its hands or rear its ugly head in the kingdom. All Jesus will have to do is hold up those hands. Nail prints in the hands. Satan's government was so evil and so dark that he actually convinced God's children to kill their creator, the one that came, the only one that could save them. And we'll all see that. Some of us can see it now. And there will never be a question again. And we'll be able to go forward in peace, knowing that the question had been put out there. The whole thing unfolded over millennium, generations. It was all recorded. And if you ever want to go back and you have any questions, the books will be there open. I like to imagine that there will be a library there. And the book of life that records the deeds of all of God's children will be there to examine. Our own, hopefully not. Hopefully not. That would be uncomfortable, wouldn't it? Thank you, gentlemen. May God bless you and your families. Please keep us in your prayers. If I missed your super chats, I may have missed some. I do apologize. I think there was one more that came up there. We have a super chat from Mr. K. Bowers 8111. Shout out to you. And he writes, I may be wrong, but at 41, finding a woman with no kids is going to be hard to find. I'll just have to continue to strengthen my faith and work for me. You know what, Kay Bowers? You don't need to marry someone your age, to be honest with you. I know that this is going to go against traditional way of thinking, but those things are changing. People will try to shame you, but I think if you're 41, go get yourself established and marry someone younger. You don't want to marry anyone with 41 because they have probably multiple marriages. They're ruined. They're all damaged, tons of baggage, ex-lovers. Oh, no. Goodness. Not a chance. I wouldn't marry anyone over 30. It'd have to be in their 20s, to be honest with you. I mean, because if your goal is to have children, you need to have someone that is fertile. And fertility, non-high-risk pregnancy takes place of women when they're in their 20s, not in their 30s. So unless you're made of money and you want to get into in vitro and all of these things and egg freezing and all this nonsense, if you want to have kids and it hasn't happened and you're getting started late in life, go find someone younger. And I don't care what anyone says. Anyone who's going to shame you for that is going to be older women. They don't like that because that puts them out of the realm. They think that we should pair up age for age. But it's not the same. A man at 41, 50, 60 can father hundreds, thousands of kids. We don't have any expiration date. We kind of actually mature and really reach our stride in our 40s and 50s. And if you can find someone that's 20 years younger than you, I would never say anything about that. If you say otherwise, then what you're saying is that a woman that's in her mid-20s or 30s doesn't have enough brains to make a decision for herself who she wants to marry or who she wants to have kids with. Good grief. If she wants to make that decision, she can make it. So you just do what you want to do. If you get yourself established in a home and a good environment and you've got your act together and you want to have kids, don't mess with those old straggles. Let them, they've made their decision. They're of very low value. If they've got kids, never marry a single mother. Don't do it. It's not your problem. And her problems will become your problems. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for that super chat. May God bless you. Thank you to Overton and everyone. I can never remember everyone's names. Goodness. Overton, he was above and beyond. He really helped me today with those super chats I missed. So shout out to Overton. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. May God bless you and your families. I'm going to run inside, see if Mrs. W is ready, and we might run up and go grab a Christmas tree before it snows too much. So put some chains on. Thank you for watching. May God bless you and your families. Pray for us. We pray for you constantly. We'll see you guys over on the next one.